The Los Angeles Metro Rail hummed as it glided through the underground tunnels, carrying its usual mix of passengers, students, professionals, artists, and the occasional tourist who had underestimated LA's sprawling transit system. Among the sea of faces, a young man in his late 20s, dressed in an oversized hoodie and ripped jeans, tapped away at his phone. His name was Jake Thompson, a social media influencer who thrived on controversy. Jake wasn't the kind to keep his opinions to himself. In fact, he made a living by sharing them, loudly. His latest gimmick? Roaming public places and calling out public figures in viral videos. He'd done it before, ambushing celebrities at coffee shops, interrupting politicians during speeches, even sneaking into high-profile events for a hot take. And today, he had a new target. A few seats away sat Karoline Leavitt, the White House press secretary under President Donald Trump. Dressed in a sharp navy blue blazer over a white blouse, her blonde hair tied back in a sleek ponytail, she scrolled through her phone, unaware of the spectacle about to unfold. Jake's eyes lit up. "No way," he muttered, angling his phone toward her and hitting the record button. This was going to be gold. He stood up, adjusting his hoodie dramatically, and walked toward her. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest on the Metro today," he announced, his voice loud enough to turn heads. Karoline looked up, her blue eyes meeting his, calm but observant. She had dealt with journalists, senators, and even foreign diplomats trying to rattle her. A random loudmouth on public transit wasn't going to be any different. "Oh wow," Jake continued, moving his phone closer. "Look who it is. The face of the Trump administration's spin machine, Karoline Leavitt." A few passengers turned their heads, some recognizing her, others simply intrigued by the unfolding drama. Karoline sighed and tucked her phone into her handbag, straightening in her seat. "I guess it's my lucky day," Jake went on, flashing a grin. "I gotta ask, Karoline, how does it feel working for the most divisive president in American history? Or do you just wake up every morning practicing your poker face for the press?" A few chuckles rippled through the train. Karoline smiled politely, her voice even and composed. "Are you asking a genuine question? Or is this just for your followers?" Jake laughed, holding his phone up. "Oh, don't worry. My audience loves to see people in power squirm." Karoline tilted her head, her smile never faltering. "That's cute. But if your goal is to humiliate me, you might want to come better prepared." A murmur spread through the train car. Some passengers leaned in, sensing something far more interesting than their usual commute. Jake's grin faltered, but he quickly recovered. "Oh, don't worry, I came prepared." He took a deep breath, launching into a well-rehearsed rant. "So, Karoline, let's talk about your job, your real job. You stand behind a podium, smiling, dodging tough questions, spinning narratives, and defending a man who's literally dismantling democracy." His voice grew louder. "How does it feel to be the mouthpiece for corruption? To stand up there and pretend like everything's fine while the rest of us are out here struggling?" Passengers now watched intently. Some nodded in agreement, others looked on skeptically. Karoline, however, remained unfazed. She crossed her legs and leaned forward slightly. "Are you done, or do you want to add a few more dramatic pauses for effect?" A few chuckles broke out. Jake's smirk twitched, but he pressed on. "I mean, it's just crazy, right? You talk about the greatness of America while millions of people can't even afford rent in cities like this." Karoline finally responded, her voice firm but not aggressive. "So, you're mad at me because America has problems?" Jake rolled his eyes. "No, I'm mad because you stand there and lie to the American people every day." Karoline's lips curled into a knowing smile. "I see. And you, who makes money from stirring up controversy on social media, believe you're the voice of truth." Silence. For the first time, Jake hesitated. The train slowed as they approached the next station, but no one moved. They were all waiting to see where this would go. Karoline's expression remained unchanged. "Let me ask you something, Jake. When was the last time you did something real to help the problems you claim to care so much about?" Jake blinked. "What do you mean?" Karoline's voice softened, but it carried weight. "You talk about struggling Americans, about corruption, about rent prices. Have you donated to struggling families? Have you advocated for a policy? Have you actually done anything besides chasing clicks and views?" The train came to a stop. A few passengers exchanged glances, nodding in agreement. Jake's confidence wavered. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. The doors slid open. Karoline smiled. "I'll wait." For the first time, Jake Thompson found himself at a loss for words. His online persona thrived on confrontation, on putting public figures on the spot and making them squirm. But Karoline Leavitt? She wasn't flustered. She wasn't defensive. She was calm, composed, and worst of all, turning the tables on him. The passengers inside the metro train felt the shift in energy. Some smirked, while others waited for Jake's comeback. A young man with AirPods hanging from his ears muttered, "Oof, she got you, bro." Jake let out a forced laugh, shaking his head. "Oh, come on. You're seriously trying to make this about me?" Karoline tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. "You're the one who made this about me, Jake. You walked over here, pointed a camera in my face, and started making accusations. Now I'm asking you, a self-proclaimed voice for the people, what you've actually done to help them." Jake's fingers tightened around his phone. His online audience was watching. He could practically hear the comments rolling in. Some of his followers would back him up, but others would call him out if he dodged this. He swallowed. "Look, I raise awareness. I use my platform to expose corruption and hypocrisy." Karoline gave a slight nod. "That's great. But exposing something isn't the same as fixing it." Jake scoffed. "And you think you're fixing things?" Karoline smiled, her tone unwavering. "I show up every day and do my job. I communicate policy, I answer questions, even the unfair ones, and I take responsibility for what I say. But you show up when it's convenient. You find a public figure, put them on blast, and move on to the next viral moment. That's not activism, Jake. That's performance." A few people in the train muttered in agreement. An older woman near the doors chuckled. "She's got a point, son." Jake forced another laugh, but it lacked his usual bravado. "So what? You're saying I should just shut up and let people like you run the country unchecked?" Karoline leaned back, crossing her arms. "No. I'm saying if you really care, you should do more than just complain." Jake's jaw clenched. He wasn't used to being on this side of an argument. Usually, his targets fumbled, got defensive, or stormed off. Karoline was different. She was engaging without getting emotional. "So, let's flip the script," Karoline continued, her voice casual but cutting. "You criticize my job, but let's talk about yours. How many people have you helped by yelling at politicians on the metro?" Silence. Jake shifted uncomfortably. He wanted to say something, anything, but no clever comeback came to mind. The metro train lurched forward, moving toward the next stop. The tension inside the car had shifted. This wasn't just another one of Jake's viral moments. This was something different. Karoline glanced at his phone. "Are you still recording?" Jake hesitated. Slowly, almost reluctantly, he lowered the phone. Karoline smiled. "Good, because real conversations don't happen through a camera lens." A murmur of approval rippled through the train. Even some of the passengers who didn't particularly like the Trump administration had to admit she handled herself well. Jake, however, wasn't ready to give up. He had one last card to play. Taking a deep breath, he squared his shoulders. "All right, Karoline, you want to have a real conversation? Let's talk about the policies you defend. Let's talk about Trump's record, his handling of the economy, healthcare, immigration. Let's go." Karoline's smile didn't waver. She simply nodded. "All right, Jake, let's talk." And with that, the debate was officially on. The metro train rumbled forward, its passengers now fully invested in what had become an impromptu debate. Some had even pulled out their phones, not to record, but to fact-check. Jake Thompson straightened his hoodie, determination flickering in his eyes. He was known for taking down public figures, and he wasn't about to let Karoline Leavitt make him look foolish. "All right," Jake began, crossing his arms. "Let's start with the economy. You stand up there and act like everything is great under Trump, but working-class people are struggling more than ever. Rent in LA is sky-high, wages aren't keeping up, and the middle class is disappearing. So tell me, how do you justify defending his administration?" Karoline leaned back slightly, unfazed. "Jake, you bring up some real concerns, but let's look at the facts. Under President Trump, we've seen record-low unemployment, job growth across multiple sectors, and a major push to bring American manufacturing back home. You might not like the man, but the numbers don't lie." Jake smirked. Yeah, some numbers. But you're ignoring the reality on the ground. Inflation is still an issue and most people aren't feeling the benefits you're talking about. Karoline nodded. That's fair. Inflation has been a challenge, but let's not pretend it's unique to this administration. Globally, economies are still recovering from the pandemic-era policies that flooded markets with cash. The difference? Trump's administration is tackling it by boosting domestic energy production, cutting unnecessary regulations, and pushing policies that encourage businesses to reinvest in American workers. A man in a business suit a few seats away nodded. She's got a point on that. Jake's jaw tightened. He quickly shifted gears. Fine. Let's talk about healthcare. Trump's policies have done nothing but make it harder for low-income Americans to get access to affordable care. Karoline arched an eyebrow. You mean like how the previous administration's healthcare plan forced people into skyrocketing premiums while narrowing their provider options? The truth is, healthcare is a broken system and no administration has fully fixed it. But under Trump, we've expanded price transparency, allowed more choice through association health plans, and pushed for reforms that lower prescription drug prices. A young woman wearing a nurse's badge chimed in. Actually, I work in healthcare, and that price transparency rule did help a lot of patients. Jake inhaled sharply. He wasn't used to losing the crowd. He needed a knockout punch. All right, he said, his voice growing sharper. Let's talk about immigration. Trump's administration has made life miserable for migrants, separating families, putting kids in cages, and pushing xenophobic policies. A few passengers murmured. Immigration was always a hot-button issue. Karoline, however, didn't flinch. Jake, I appreciate your passion, but let's correct some misinformation. First, the kids in cages narrative. Those policies were in place long before Trump took office under both Bush and Obama. Second, this administration is enforcing immigration laws that have existed for decades. We're not against immigration, we're against illegal immigration. There's a legal process for a reason. Jake laughed bitterly. Oh, come on. You know full well Trump's policies are just about fear-mongering. Karoline's expression remained calm. No, they're about protecting American workers, ensuring national security, and upholding the rule of law. Do you think every country in the world just allows people to cross their borders unchecked? Silence. A Latino man wearing a Dodgers cap nodded. I immigrated here legally. It wasn't easy, but it was fair. She's right about that. Jake's confidence wavered. The debate wasn't going the way he'd expected. His viral moment? It was backfiring. Badly. Karoline leaned forward. Jake, I'll ask you again. What have you done, beyond complaining, to help these issues? Jake's face burned. He scrambled for an answer. I raise awareness. Karoline smiled. That's great. But at some point, awareness needs to turn into action. Otherwise, you're just talking. The train slowed as they approached the next station. The tension in the car was thick, but the crowd's opinion had shifted. Jake had walked into this thinking he'd expose Karoline. Instead, she had exposed him. As the doors opened, Jake exhaled. He had one last choice, double down or walk away. He turned off his phone. Guess I'll have to rethink a few things, he muttered. Karoline simply smiled. The doors slid shut. The metro rumbled forward. Jake Thompson sat down heavily in the seat across from Karoline Leavitt, his phone now tucked away in his pocket. The metro train rocked gently as it moved forward, but the weight of the conversation still hung in the air. Passengers who had been entertained by the verbal showdown were now watching quietly, some impressed, some deep in thought. Karoline, meanwhile, remained composed, her hands neatly folded in her lap. She had handled countless journalists, aggressive reporters, and public figures trying to twist her words, but this was just a misguided social media influencer looking for a viral moment. Jake let out a deep breath and rubbed the back of his neck. I gotta admit, you're not what I expected. Karoline chuckled. Let me guess. You thought I'd be robotic, dodging every question with pre-packaged talking points? Jake shrugged. Something like that. He hesitated before adding, I still don't agree with a lot of what you said, but I can't say you didn't handle yourself well. Karoline smiled. That's because I don't see debates like this as a game. It's not about owning the other person. It's about understanding different perspectives and defending what you believe in. Jake scoffed. That's rich coming from the spokesperson of an administration that thrives on division. Karoline raised an eyebrow. And what do you think you were trying to do just now? Jake blinked. What? She leaned forward slightly. You came over here, camera rolling, hoping to embarrass me. You weren't looking for a real conversation, you were looking for a moment. Something you could clip and post online to get engagement. And that's exactly what political division thrives on, people acting rather than listening. Jake swallowed hard. She wasn't wrong. His whole career was built on calling people out, creating spectacle, making sure his name stayed trending. But was he actually changing anything? He frowned. So, what? You think people like me should just shut up and accept everything politicians say? Karoline shook her head. Not at all. Hold leaders accountable. Ask tough questions. Push for change. But do it the right way, with facts, with real dialogue, and with solutions in mind. Not just outrage. Jake leaned back, processing her words. For years, he had been so focused on being heard that he had never really stopped to listen. A teenage girl sitting nearby, wearing a UCLA hoodie, spoke up. You know, she's right. I follow a lot of political influencers, but most of them just argue for the sake of arguing. No one actually talks about solutions anymore. A man in his 40s, wearing a Dodgers jacket, nodded. Yeah. We're so busy hating the other side, we forget that most of us just want what's best for the country. Jake exhaled sharply. Man, I really thought I was gonna make you look bad today. Karoline smirked. I get that a lot. Jake chuckled despite himself. So, if you weren't a press secretary, what would you be doing? Karoline thought for a moment. Probably still something in politics or media. But at the end of the day, I just want to make sure people are informed. Even if they don't agree with me. Jake nodded slowly. The metro began slowing down again, approaching another station. Outside, the LA skyline loomed in the distance. So what now, he asked. Karoline smiled. That's up to you. Jake looked down at his phone. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel the urge to chase the next viral moment. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to rethink how he used his platform. The doors slid open and Jake stood up. He looked back at Karoline, a strange mix of respect and frustration in his expression. I'll be watching you, Leavitt. But next time, I'll come prepared. Karoline grinned. I'd expect nothing less. Jake stepped off the train, disappearing into the crowd. As the metro doors closed and the train continued forward, Karoline took a deep breath. Another debate, another lesson learned for both of them. But something told her this wouldn't be the last time she saw Jake Thompson. The metro rumbled forward, the tension in the air slowly dissolving. Some passengers exchanged glances, a few whispering among themselves about what they had just witnessed. A debate between a social media provocateur and the White House press secretary wasn't exactly an everyday occurrence on public transit. Karoline Leavitt glanced out the window, her reflection staring back at her. Another debate handled. Another moment where she had to prove that real leadership wasn't about shouting the loudest, but about standing firm in your beliefs while still being open to dialogue. A man sitting across from her cleared his throat. He looked to be in his late 50s, dressed in a well-worn work uniform with grease stains on his sleeves. Miss Leavitt, he said, his voice gravelly but kind. Karoline turned to him. Yes. The man nodded toward the doors where Jake had just exited. I don't much care for politicians, to be honest. Never trusted em. But I gotta say, you handled yourself real well back there. That was different. Karoline smiled. Thank you. I just believe that if we're going to argue about politics, we should at least do it with facts, not just emotions. He chuckled. That's rare these days. He reached into his pocket and pulled out an old business card, handing it to her. Name's Mike. Been working in this city for over 30 years. If you ever need to know how policies actually affect real people, not just what they say in press conferences, give me a call. Karoline took the card, reading it briefly before tucking it into her coat pocket. I appreciate that, Mike. And I mean it, voices like yours are the ones that matter most. Mike nodded, tipping an imaginary hat. Keep doing what you're doing, young lady. At that moment, Karoline's phone buzzed. A text from one of her communications aides flashed across the screen. We need a statement ASAP. The metro video is going viral. She sighed. Of course it was. Across the city, Jake Thompson had just finished walking out of the metro station, his thoughts still tangled from the encounter. He pulled out his phone and stared at the last video he had recorded. He had planned to post it immediately like he always did, but this time he hesitated. For the first time, he wasn't sure if going viral was the most important thing. Instead of hitting upload, He tapped out a tweet. Had a debate with Karoline Leavitt today. Thought I'd expose her, but she flipped the script. Whether you agree with her or not, gotta admit, she's sharp. Made me think about how we argue politics these days. Maybe we should all try listening more. He stared at the words for a long moment before pressing send. Almost instantly replies flooded in. Some mocked him for getting owned. Others applauded him for admitting it. And some, surprisingly, engaged in civil debate, something rare for his timeline. Jake sighed, tucking his phone away. Maybe this was a sign. Maybe it was time to do things differently. Back on the metro, Karoline's phone buzzed again. This time, a new headline popped up in her notifications. Social media influencer Jake Thompson calls for more listening after heated exchange with White House press secretary. Karoline smirked. Maybe there was hope for civil discourse after all. As the metro pulled into her stop, she stood up, straightened her blazer, and stepped off the train, ready for whatever debate came next.